welcome to Raashtra Sevak, our YouTube channel. I am your host Rohan Deshpande.
And I am Chaitanya Sabunis.
Today we bring to you one of the rare gems from the crown of glorious Indian warriors. And to enlighten us on this topic, we have today with us a young and energetic persona who is a merchant navy sailor by profession and is also a popular public speaker and a writer in various columns. So friends, please welcome Mr. Aneesh Gokhale.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
So Anish ji, your book Brahmaputra was published back in 2015. Tell us the idea behind the same.
So, the journey of the book actually started by chance. Picked up a Amar Chitra Katha on Lachit Borphukan. I think I must have been in maybe 7th or 8th standard, and I happened to pick up this Amar Chitra Katha. It had this story of Lachit Borphukan, and found that a lot of similarities in how he fought against the Mughals compared to how the Marathas fought against the Mughals at the same time. So you will have, battles fought with them, you will have the guerrilla warfare, and it was a very unique kind of story that from the northeast, person, a hero had come about who had fought such a valiant battle against Aurangzeb himself, and at the same time we don't know much about him. So this was way back when I was in school. But that name and that story and that Amar Chitra Katha had stuck with me ever since. So I wrote my first book on Maratha history in 2012, and then the second book I decided to pick up Lachit Borphukan because he was totally unknown. Outside of Assam, he is a totally unknown personality. So I decided why not take up this topic. When I went even further into the topic, into the subject, and researched more about it, I found out what a great personality he is, and he had all the qualities of what could truly make a great leader, which is what enabled his victory over the Mughals. At the same time, as I mentioned earlier, also a lot of things in common with the Marathas, with Chhatrapati Shivaji. A lot of names are common, Diler Khan, Ram Singh, Aurangzeb, which also piqued my interest as to how are these people then connected to Assam also. And then Brahmaputra is a result of this research and this interest in Lachit Borphukan.
Mr. Anish, when we speak of some of the glorious kingdoms which happened in India, then the names of Marathas, Guptas, Mauryas, these names come to our mind very easily. But at the same time, there was a dynasty in India which ruled over the entire northeast for almost 600 years. In spite of having such a glorious past, such a glorious victorious period, hardly anybody knows about them in India. So we need your guidance on this topic, please.
So again, it's a function of the earlier fact that because the history of the northeast is unknown, automatically the Ahom dynasty is also unknown to the rest of the country. And not only history but even the geography and the culture of the northeast is very recently that it has started coming out and becoming more popular in the rest of India. Till very recently, we had a situation where, or even now, the states of the northeast and the capitals, people will find it difficult to point out which state is where and which capital is where. Not only the lay public, but I saw a TV news report a few years ago where the capitals of Manipur and Nagaland got mixed up. That kind of mistake, if you make with Maharashtra or Madhya Pradesh, people will start laughing. How can you mix up capitals? But over there, for what they call the mainland, the mix up state capitals, it was a more or less usual occurrence earlier, but now that is slowly changing in past few years, thankfully. So coming to the Ahom dynasty, again, as you mentioned, they ruled for a very long period of time. I think one of the longest running dynasties in India. They migrated from what is today's Burma and Western China region, Yunnan province, and in 1228 they finally migrated to what is today's Eastern Assam, and more or less ruled from 1228 AD right up to 1823. 1823 finally the Burmese actually came and captured that kingdom, and it is the British who then annexed Assam as a result of defeating Burma. There's an interesting story to that also, is that how did Assam enter the British Empire? Because they defeated Burma and they annexed Assam out of it. But prior to that, for 600 years continuous, from 1228 up to 1823 or about, the Ahoms were ruling, and in this time span, they faced about 17 to 20 invasions of various Muslim rulers, right from the time of Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. You can notice that in 1206 AD, Bengal was invaded. Same year, Assam was invaded. In that part of Assam, a different dynasty was ruling. Ahoms were still yet to come, but from the next invasion onwards, the Ahoms were there. So 17 to 18 invasions were stopped. One of them being this concern with Lachit Borphukan, which happened in 17th century. But there were a lot of invasions before that also which were defeated. In fact, one of the earliest Sanskrit inscriptions in Assam is of the 14th century. And one Muhammad Tughril Khan has been defeated, and that Sanskrit inscription is one of the earliest inscriptions that how the Assamese army defeated him. Even in case of Lachit Borphukan, we have a Sanskrit stone pillar. The script is Assamese, language is Sanskrit, which is currently in Guwahati Museum. And again, it has been inscribed as to how Lachit Borphukan defeated the Mughals in 1667. So this is the kind of glorious history they have over 600 years. And not only in case of stopping invasions, but this 600 years also led to a cultural rejuvenation in Assam. They built a lot of temples, did a lot of charity, contributed a lot towards the culture of what we today know as Assam. This same dynasty also included, after Lachit Borphukan, a person called Rudra Singha. And Rudra Singha in fact raised an army of 4 lakh soldiers to attack Mughal India. Unfortunately, at this point he died in Guwahati. But we can really surmise as to if this army had actually commenced its march, maybe Eastern India's history could have been totally different, because then you are looking at Bengal being invaded from the east. So it's a very different and glorious history, and hopefully people get to know more about it as more and more is written about them these 600 years.
So Anishji, tell us something about Lachit Borphukan. Who is Lachit Borphukan and what can be said about him?
So Lachit Borphukan was the Senapati or the army commander of the Ahom or Assamese forces which defeated the Mughals at Saraighat. In fact, he was the army commander about 4 years prior to that also, from about 4 years prior, 1667 to 1671. And prior to that, he held various administrative positions. He came from an aristocratic family. His father was Mumai Tamuli Barbarua. He started his life as a junior diplomat or junior administrator. He used to carry the parchment rolls or the papers, administrative papers concerning his father or his other relatives in the administration. From there he slowly rose up. We first see him being of some importance as the Dola Kaksharya Barua, who is the head of the bodyguard of the king. And he's head of the bodyguard. At that point he also fights one battle against Mir Jumla. Mir Jumla invades Assam in 1663, and a place called Dikhaumukh he actually fights Mir Jumla. So there is, but before he is appointed Borphukan actually is a rank. So I just diverge a bit and go into Assamese ranks here. So the Assamese had a very complex system or very organized system of military, where you had one person known as Paik, a soldier, and Paik is of course a Sanskrit root because we have got that same word in Marathi also and various other languages. Even in I think Oriya also that Paik word is there. Paika revolution comes from there. So Paik is a single word for soldier, and you had pikes, and depending how many pikes are going to be in a contingent, it used to be called various names. If leader of 1,000 was called Hazarika, then of 6,000 called Fukan, and of the entire army was called a Bar Fukan. All the Fukans put together. In one of my websites, in fact, as part of this talk also, you can share that screenshot. I will provide it later on, where I given the gradation of Bora for 20, for example. Saikia was for 100. So all these Assamese surnames which you are familiar with today, Saikia, Hazarika, Fukan. So these are actually army ranks, depending on how many soldiers they control at a time. It was a very organized structure. 20, 50, 100, 1,000, 3,000, 6,000. and over the entire army was the Borphukan. So he gets appointed Borphukan because Mir Jumla manages to annex Guwahati. Mir Jumla and Diler Khan, again familiar names to Marathi readers or listeners. We find that Mir Jumla and Diler Khan managed to invade Assam during Aurangzeb's reign by taking advantage of the internal dissent happening at the time. Some internal politics are going on in Assamese society. They take advantage of it, they invade, they manage to annex quite a bit of it, manage to annex Guwahati. And then the challenge is to drive the Mughals out of Guwahati, and not just drive them out but actually again face a counter attack and manage to keep Guwahati. There is where the greatness of Lachit Borphukan comes in, which I try to weave into Brahmaputra, the book, as to how he first fights them off and then with his genius manages to stave off a much bigger attack which is led by Ram Singh himself all the way from Agra. And Lachit Borphukan's greatness is in these 4-5 years in defeating the Mughals and then strategizing a successful defense of Assam such that it is not a one-off victory where again the Mughals come and start ruling them. So his genius really comes through leadership skills. How he strategizes is unique in the sense that they fight on the river. One of the I think only examples of Indian history where a key battle is fought entirely on the river. You might have some battles on the coastline which are popular, but this is something that has happened entirely on the Brahmaputra river. And his genius in harnessing that geography to the advantage of the Ahoms is also something I tried to bring out in Brahmaputra. So this is what makes him great. Unfortunately, just the year after the Battle of Saraighat, Lachit Borphukan passed away. In fact, he was very ill on the day of the battle. One of the things that has become folklore in Assam is as to how he was very ill on the day of the battle. And because his presence was not there on the battlefield, the Ahoms were actually retreating in front of the onslaught. And a very ill and sick Lachit Borphukan, who could barely walk, took the field. He entered the battlefield at that crucial juncture and he ensured that nobody deserted and they fought the Mughals. If he had not made that entry into the Brahmaputra at that point, it was quite possible that the Ahoms would have surrendered in front of Ram Singh. So this some anecdotes are there which I will explain further on, which really bring out his leadership skills and greatness, which again I have dramatized in Brahmaputra. So that's the person of Lachit Borphukan for you.
Mr. Aneesh, speaking of the greatness of Lachit Borphukan, it is also being said that some dramatic events took place during the Battle of Saraighat. Like it is heard that the Mughals tried to bribe the army commanders, and the battle actually took a very different turn. What could you say more on this?
Yes. So the Mughals had lost Assam in 1667. They gained it in 1663 up to Guwahati and slightly beyond Guwahati. And then Lachit Borphukan again came and recaptured all this in 1667. So then obviously Aurangzeb sent Ram Singh with a large army to take back whatever he had lost. The Battle of Saraighat is the end of this Ram Singh's campaign, which starts in Agra. He goes to Dhaka, meets Shaista Khan. He collects more troops, then he moves up. Around 1669 he enters Assam. And from 1669 to 1671 is a continuous attempt at trying to break through Guwahati. Now the genius of Lachit Borphukan is that he chooses Guwahati to make this stand. Guwahati is at the narrowest point in the Brahmaputra. Right now also we have a bridge going across the river at that place. One of the reasons is that it is a narrow point. And Lachit Borphukan wanted to block him at this narrowest point so that he will have to face the entire onslaught of the Assamese 300-400 kilometers away from the capital. The capital was at Gadgaon, about 400 kilometers away. And by trying to block them at Guwahati, he ensured that even if they lose this city, they still have a long distance to cover before reaching their capital city. You can still fight them instead of trying to make a last stand in their capital city itself. So this is one genius of Lachit Borphukan. Secondly, maybe they didn't have college at the time, but they had very practical knowledge of how water behaves. To be able to use the river effectively, because we know from physics that as to when your flow of the water is narrowed, the speed will increase. And the Brahmaputra flows from the east to the west. It's a river that is flowing from east to west towards the Ganga. So one thing reckoned is that the water speed is going to become fast because of narrowing. Secondly, he knew that the Mughals are going to come upstream. So now upstream, if the area is large, it is an advantage for them, easier to maneuver. But if the area is small, then the upstream becomes more of a disadvantage. He also reckoned that the boats that he had were smaller in size, easier to navigate on the river, and the Mughal boats were much larger, so they were more difficult to navigate. Especially where the river became so narrow as to become 1 mile, so having large ships didn't help. So this was the strategy Lachit Borphukan used. Ram Singh on his part used what we call Sam, Dam, Danda, Bed. So Danda is obviously carrying army with him, and he tried a lot of tricks in creating dissent among the Assamese commanders, Assamese generals against Lachit Borphukan. There are 2 or 3, and then again how Lachit reacted to it is also indicative of his leadership in these circumstances, because somebody on one side is trying something and then we have to obviously counter it. So one example was that Ram Singh tried to corrupt his generals, Lachit Borphukan's generals, by sending them letters and gifts. They had a situation at the plain called Alaboi near Guwahati, where they were locked in a stalemate for about 3 or 4 months. Nothing was moving for about 4 months. And so Ram Singh used this lull in activities to send letters and gifts to these commanders. Is that maybe Lachit Borphukan is trying something with the Mughal emperor himself, in which you won't have any kind of say. And he ensured that those letters then reached the king of Assam, the Ahom king named Chakradhar Singha in Gadgaon. And we had a very delicate situation where the king then tried to force, in fact he sent a letter to Lachit Borphukan. This is where we find that the difference between say Lachit Borphukan and Chhatrapati Shivaji comes through, where Lachit Borphukan was still an army commander. He had to follow the orders of his king, even though he believed that it was the wrong order. His king, Chakradhar Singha, sent him a letter finally. Because of all these letters going around here and there, Chakradhar Singha finally sends him a letter saying that 6 months have passed, what are you doing over there? And he is forced to deploy his infantry against the Mughal cavalry on an open field. And the Ahoms end up losing about 15,000 men on a single day. So it is nearly successful, this ploy, but his situation is somehow salvaged by not completely falling for the ploy. And as a result, Aurangzeb increases Ram Singh Mansabdari to 5,000 and gives him a lot of presents, etc. etc. That is one example of how he used the dissent or tried to corrupt the Ahoms against each other. There is one more example where Lachit Borphukan's leadership and his control over the forces comes through. We find that Lachit Borphukan actually has sent his 2 emissaries with a letter to Ram Singh. It's a letter just whatever for diplomacy. And these 2 emissaries reach there. They find that there are a couple of birds over the wooden birds, artificial birds with rubies, emeralds and diamonds, everything. It is as a decoration kept in Ram Singh's tent. So these envoys, they are very excited. One of them gets very excited because it's a very expensive kind of bird studded with jewels. And Ram Singh then gifts those 2 jeweled birds to this envoy. This is nothing for me, you can take it. He takes those birds as a gift from Ram Singh and goes back to Lachit Borphukan. But for Lachit Borphukan, this is like going against his orders and accepting gifts from somebody you are fighting against. One job has been given that to go and give a letter to Ram Singh, explain the contents and come back. You are trying to then accept gifts from him, it is as good as taking a bribe. And in response to this, he puts that envoy in jail he puts him in jail, and as a result such kind of activities don't happen because you are fighting a war and he has a very strong control over the army, which is what we can see throughout the campaign. So this is how the dissent creating is being done from the Mughal side and how the Ahoms are countering it in their own way. The Ahoms themselves have their own disinformation campaigns and spies and diplomacy which is trying to take the Mughals off guard, especially in the time period between 1663 to 1667, 4 years where they are ruling Guwahati, and the Ahoms are actually building, the Assamese are building an army, but the Mughals should not come to know about it, obviously, that an army is being built to fight us. So the entire time period is about how the Assamese keep sending letters, gifts, horses, elephants to the Faujdar at Guwahati to show that they are very scared of the Mughal emperor. And in fact, you see traces of how Chhatrapati Shivaji also did this, ki, I am your vassal, I am your servant, all these kind of letters are there from their side to keep them off guard. And finally, when they actually attack, then the Mughals don't have anywhere to run because now they have to face an army which they won't be able to detect for the past 4 years. So yes, this is the kind of politics going on at time in Assam.
So Anishji, now we know why you have put a tagline on your book as contemporary of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. So could you elaborate on this point more?
The word contemporary means in basic English terms living at the same time. So like we are contemporaries of Narendra Modi, if you can say. So we are also alive at the same time. That's the only meaning of the term. The reason why I had to put in a title is to pique interest because there is no intention to do a comparison. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj and Lachit Borphukan both are great in their own right, and it is, I believe, not entirely correct to do comparisons across geography and situations. Because although they are fighting common enemy, some of the values are common, but then again at the same time you find that there are some cardinal differences. Like I mentioned one, how Lachit Borphukan was a army commander. He was the general of the Assamese forces. The time span is also different. Chhatrapati Shivaji's time span is far more larger of being a person of great importance. And Lachit Borphukan of course did an equally important work in Assam, but then his time span is unfortunately cut short by destiny and he passes away in the year following the battle. So the contemporary word I had put in a title mainly to pique interest, mainly to pick up, create interest in readers. Merely having Lachit Borphukan in the title, I believe, would not really engage readers towards the title. So apart from those living in Assam, the name, as you know, is totally unknown. And a lot of people have come to me saying that they read the name of Chhatrapati Shivaji in the title and they wanted to know as to why is Shivaji Maharaj in a title on a book on somebody from Assam. That is the reason I put it, to create interest outside of Assam, because I knew that I needed to target a market that was outside of the Northeast. The Northeast, obviously, the Assamese know about him and because they totally worship him. But beyond the Northeast, he is very unknown. And so to have a familiar name on the cover, it creates interest. And then when you then start reading the book, you know more about the subject matter. That is the same reason that I have put 2 or 3 chapters on Chhatrapati Shivaji in the book, which happened at the same time, concerning people who are common to both. Diler Khan, for example. So Diler Khan's Purandar siege, Mirza Raja Jai Singh's Purandar siege, it happens about couple of years after this Assam campaign of his, 1665. So 1663, the Assam campaign. 2 years later, he is over here. We find that Chhatrapati Shivaji escapes from Agra and Ram Singh is involved in that. And as a punishment for Ram Singh and also as a chance to let him prove himself, Aurangzeb then sends Ram Singh to Assam in connection with this event of Chhatrapati Shivaji escaping. We find Shaiste Khan fingers get cut. Now very interesting that while all Marathi records talk about fingers being cut, Shaiste Khan's bota kapli. And after that we say Shivaji, teen bota kapli, or whatever it is, teen bota ka char bota, 3 fingers, 4 fingers. But throughout Bengal and Assamese records, it is mentioned that his thumb is cut. And I tend to believe that because the orders from Aurangzeb came for Shaista Khan immediately after this event, the fingers were cut to head directly to Bengal. And at the time, this is actually how Aurangzeb insulted Shaista Khan, because at the time the system was that if you're going to change a Subedar from one province to other province, he used to first go to Delhi. Receive all his robes, honor, sword from the Mughal emperor, and then he would proceed to the next province. But in Shaista Khan's case, Aurangzeb asked him to move to Aurangabad first and then go straight east via Nagpur to Bengal, without coming and meeting him in Delhi. There is no need to meet me in Delhi or Agra, please proceed straight to Dhaka. And over there, repeated account, because he spends the next 20 years in Bengal, a repeated account is saying that his thumb was cut. And those people obviously had a more correct eyewitness views of Shaista Khan. He says, and logically speaking also, you find that you hold the windowsill, more likely that the thumb was cut by Shivaji Maharaj. So these 2-3 incidences I have put in the book to show as to how parallelly story was going on, and again to create interest as to how these names are then relevant in both the cases. We find Diler Khan is appearing in this case also. Aurangzeb is a common everywhere, which is why I put the word contemporary to show to create interest and show that both the personalities existed at the same time. And I believe from what readers have told me that putting that name in the title helped. And again, I will stress that the attempt at comparison is not being made, because it's wrong to really compare great personas in such a way.
Speaking of the priceless contributions of Lachit Borphukan, we can say that he was a great unsung warrior. So, what followed exactly after his death in the Ahom kingdom, basically? Can you guide us on that?
So, Lachit Borphukan died in 1672, the year following Battle of Saraighat, which is actually Battle of Saraighat happened in this month in 1671, 22nd to 23rd of March 1671 the battle was fought. Soon afterwards died, and from that point on there was a bit of tumult in the Assamese society. We have one more important person known as Atan Buragohain, who was the Prime Minister at the time. He also played a very crucial role in the diplomacy which happened between Mughals and the Assamese, and actually he also played a crucial role in warfare also by holding up one side of the Brahmaputra river. Lachit Borphukan was on the southern bank, where the city of Guwahati still exists, existed at that time also, and Atan Buragohain was on the north bank of so that to prevent an attempt of going across from the northern side of the river. So he played that critical role, and he played very critical role in strategizing against the Mughals in their diplomacy, the Assamese diplomacy. There were some in the court who said as soon as the Mughals had left in 1663, after taking Guwahati, Mir Jumla and Diler Khan left, there were some who said let us immediately start the attacks on the Mughals. But then he was one of the persons who was in fact the main person who suggested that there is no point in doing that, in just having one invasion and trying to take Guwahati, because Mughals will attack again, and then how are you going to defend? So this was Atan Buragohain's advice, that we wait 2-3 years, build army properly, be in a situation that we can successfully defend against the Mughals, even a larger army, and then we move. So on Lachit Borphukan's death, we find that the next few years, in fact one time it also happens that Guwahati is again given back to the Mughals in 1682 by one of the Ahom kings, because we find Chakradeva Singh died, then the further Ahom kings come about. But finally the situation does stabilize by the beginning of the 18th century. We find somebody called Rudra Singha come to the throne, and even before him Shiva Singha is also there. Shiva Singha actually built a lot of the temples which you see today in Assam have been built during the reign of Shiva Singha, such as your temple in Naswakalanta or in Guwahati also and other places. But Rudra Singha is one of the persons who is really one of the greats of the Ahom dynasty, comes about in the early 18th century, and he unites the tribes across the northeast. As I mentioned earlier, he builds an army of 4 lakh to invade Mughal Bengal. He carries out a lot of work even in the social and cultural fields. A lot of roads are built, lot of dams are built, and in fact, the old National Highway 37, which passes through Assam, which is now I think broadened, widened, whatever. But the old NH 37, one of its sections, the bridge, that bridge is originally built by Rudra Singha in 1712 sometime. Stone bridge completely. Actually, it's a single stone or 2 or 3 stones hewn out. But the bridge originally is of Shiva Singha, and now they have asphalted it, etc. etc. There are photos available on the internet. You can see a truck is flying on that bridge. It is built in 1712 or 1710 maybe. So early 18th century, but it lasted for 300 years. I don't know the current situation whether trucks continue to ply on that 300-year-old bridge, but you can see the kind of quality of work being done in that. In the 20th century also, there were trucks flying on this bridge being built back 300 years ago. So Rudra Singha is one person who really comes about. Then we find further on this Ahom dynasty continues for the next 100 years. In fact, I put out on the internet also once the entire list of Ahom kings right from 1228 up to 1823. Further on towards the end of the 18th century, some problems do start appearing in their society. I will not go much into it because it's a bit of a controversial topic as to what created these dissensions, but we can suffice to say that when the Burmese attacked in the early 19th century, in the close of the 18th century, the Assamese society wasn't as well prepared to face them as they was when the Mughals had attacked, and as a result the Burmese were riding completely roughshod all over Assam. They captured Guwahati, captured all the capitals, and the Ahom dynasty more or less came to an end in the sense that by 1821 something, the last king was more or less a puppet of the Burmese king. And till today, there is great resentment among the Assamese for the Burmese on account exactly of the invasion, because it was a devastating invasion. It was very cruel in nature. They lost thousands of lives, and basically they lost their independence to the Burmese. So this is where they existed as a puppet ruler of the Burmese. Then we had the Anglo-Burmese wars, because the British believed that Burma could attack Bengal, just across the Bay of Bengal, across, and you reach Burma. Especially when they saw that the Burmese had attacked Assam. So now next stop was Bengal. To preempt that from happening, the British invaded Burma, or Myanmar today. And they finally signed a Treaty of Yandabu in 1826, by which the British annexed Assam and attached it with the British Empire of India. And of course they ruled Burma also, but they created Burma as a separate province and the whole of Northeast as a separate province, which was in those days known as Northeast Frontier Agency, etc. And that's how then of course the Ahom dynasty came to an end in 1826, in that the British then took over the administration. This British Burmese war, a lot of other interesting things also happened. One thing was the first telegraph got sent during the war, and we had the first steamship deployed during the war. So here are a couple of technological marvels which the world saw for more or less the first time, not the first time, but at least this part of India. And there was another attempt in 1857, like it was in other parts of India, where they tried to reinstate the Ahom monarchy by driving the British out, which is what was happening in other parts of the country also, where they tried to reinstate the rulers by driving out the British. It also shows that the Assamese were connected to the Indian freedom struggle right from 1857, if not before it. So this is more or less the history of the Ahom dynasty that happens post Lachit Borphukan.
Mr. Aneesh, now that you have helped us to uncover and enlighten on this very rare gem, one of the largest ruling dynasties in India, let's come to your book, the Brahmaputra. Now, choosing a topic in history, doing a research on it, and writing a book in itself is a task. Going beyond that, you have chosen a topic which is not native to your land, not native to your language, not native to your state. So, what are the challenges you faced in choosing this topic, doing research on it? Could you please enlighten on this?
So the challenge in a sense is that mainly challenge was about research. As far as being from the own land is concerned, yes, it is more easy for me to research on Maratha history. But then I was thinking in terms of an Indian should be able to write on any topic across India. I think one of the main problems is that a lot of writers, good writers, have written mainly in their local languages on their local heroes. And as a result, that topic has never managed to come outside their state. In fact, in Maratha history also, if you see, the best literature even today, maybe recently the situation had started changing because we have some authors who are writing in English also. As a result, the audience increases. But we find that one of the main drawbacks is that a lot of the good literature in Maratha history also is in Marathi and was in Marathi for a very long time. Right up to the 70s, 80s, 90s, I would say that if you wanted to read about the Marathas in English, your best source was Grant Duff and other English authors. And as a result, the kind of impression created about Marathas even today has been on basis of those records because they have not been written in the local language by the local people. It's very important that people do write in the local language, I mean in English about this history. Similarly came the case with Assam is that there is nobody who has written about him recently in English. As a result, he has remained an Assamese hero, more or less unknown to the rest of the country. So I believe that if more people do this, it will be better for history and better for dissemination of information across the country, so that if one person from one province writes about the other province, because not only about writing but your point of view will also matter in this case, because how much ever I try, I cannot get an Assamese point of view. It will be a Maharashtrian point of view on Assam, which is why you will find Chhatrapati Shivaji in those narratives. Somebody else will write about Lachit Borphukan, maybe he's from South India, he will try to fit according to his point of view, and generally what you'll find a much richer history coming through. So this is one reason I picked up the topic. Of course, him being an inspiration was another main reason. Coming to the research part, books were hard to find, very difficult to find those books online. I went to Guwahati, stayed there 10-15 days. Prior going there, I did research regarding which places to go to once I go there concerning Lachit Borphukan. One thing fortunately that happened is that the battles mainly take place around Guwahati. So my stay in 10-15 days, I could cover the areas around the city and go to those places. The bookshops, old bookshop which was selling those books on Lachit Borphukan, available in Assam. Again, those books you can find only in the bookshops. It is impossible to find those kind of books somewhere on various online retail sites. I think such areas exist in every city. In Pune also you'll have ABC having those kind of books. Sapavavan Chowk is a place in Pune. Having Mumbai also, in South Mumbai you have those kind of bookshop stalls. Similarly in Assam also I found them. In Guwahati I researched them. I met people. Very important to meet people and actually gauge as to what is the common person's perspective on Lachit Borphukan. And the adulation I saw is very similar to how the adulation, respect is there for Chhatrapati Shivaji in Maharashtra. Yes, some historical facts, if you ask them, might be off when you read the books, but the general praise they have, and in fact, the happiness I saw on their face when I mentioned that book on Lachit Borphukan being written, something I'll not forget. Right from the receptionist at the hotel I stayed, to a headmaster of a school I met, to the people in the museum, all of them have a very positive reaction to this. In that, and very important to understand this as to what makes a person a folk hero. We have your paper history and books and everything, and then there is a folk history. Even in Maharashtra, we find, for example, Tanaji Malusare or Shaiste Khan, Chhatrapati Shivaji exploits or Tanaji Malusare exploits are as much a part of folk history as they are of real history. And it is the folk history which has come through Povade or other sources. We find we don't need to read book to know about Tanaji Malusare. It has come through us, through our parents or elders or somebody, grandparents maybe. I didn't have to read Tanaji Malasare's story to find out about him. I knew that story before I picked up a book on Chhatrapati Shivaji. And because that shows how that person has really come through as a hero to the masses. When you don't need to depend on books to know about him, it shows that a person has really come through as a hero for the masses through these acts and events, and which is also important to really build his personality. So this is how the meeting people helped. Books obviously I had to read. I went to those places, 10-15 days stayed there, and then I came back and wrote the book.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aneesh Gokhale, for your valuable time today. I sincerely believe by writing this book, you have carved out a niche in the topics of history. So friends, we had with us today historian and author Mr. Aneesh Gokhale. Do let us know how did you find our session on our comments box, and stay tuned with us for further content.